Hello, everyone. Welcome to this morning's Big Apple Film Festival. We're here with Ursula Ellis, who's going to be talking about making a studio short film. And I don't know if a lot of you are on the East Coast, but we're getting hit with a bunch of snow here. So hopefully my feed stays active. And so it's a Q&A. So, feel free to use a raised hand emoji or type in the chat. If you want to tell Ursula about your project, that's fine. That's welcome. And we might as well get started. So welcome, Ursula.
Good morning. Yeah, I'm in Los Angeles where it is not snowing, but feeling the snow in spirit. I wish we would get snow, every once in a while. But the grass is always greener, snowier, depending on where you live. But yeah, I'll tell you guys a little bit about myself. I'm a writer-director. I was born in Germany. My parents were in the military, so I grew up moving all around the country. And I went to a lot of film school. I went to Northwestern for undergrad and then Columbia to get my MFA. And during that time, I made many short films through school and through various grant programs, some of which had some oversight, but they were more or less indie shorts. And then since graduating from Columbia, I've made a few more shorts that have been a little more for hire. And my most recent short was a studio project for 20th Digital Disney that was released on Hulu called Occupational Hazard. And so today, talking through the studio short film process, I'm mostly going to be referencing that project and just what made it a little different about making a short film, independently through school or through a maybe more relaxed kind of program. But I'm curious if you guys want to, raise your hands or drop in the chat how many of you either have shorts that you've already made or shorts that you're prepping right now. Feel free to respond, whatever's best for you.
Yeah, I don't know if, so if you, okay, there's AS has
Nice.
a short.
Prepping 2 shorts and a micro budget, nice. And yeah, features too, just any projects that you're working on right now.
Okay.
2 shorts and festivals, awesome, Gina. And a feature with the studio, it's cool. All right. So you might know some of this already and can feel free to add add to the advice. But cool. So
And I've done a few features and working on a new feature now. And then Narcy says a short film for festivals.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. So like I mentioned, the project I'm gonna mostly be talking about is my short Occupational Hazard. And if you guys want to check it out, it's on Hulu. It's a part of Bite Size Halloween, which was like anthology short film series that was produced for several years. And initially Bite Size Halloween was like broadcast interstitials. So if you were watching like the Disney Channel or various other Fox properties, they were a Fox company at first, you might see one of these shorts. And then I think maybe briefly they had a deal with Netflix, and then when Disney bought Fox, it became a Disney subsidiary. And so then they started making these seasons for Hulu of shorts. And in the last few years, they made many short films. And so, my project is just one of many. And so you can check out kind of the gamut of studio shorts that they produced as a good sample of, what might make these projects a little different. But so Isaac has a feature running the festival circuit and distro meetings right now, thinking of doing a short before my next feature. Nice. Yeah, I have a lot of friends who do both and continue to do both, as well as many famous filmmakers who, still make shorts as well. And I think it can be nice to break things up. But yeah, so I'll state some things that might seem a little obvious, but making a studio short as opposed to making an indie short is different in a variety of ways. Yeah, when you're making something independently, you might have less resources and money. You might not, but generally you have a little more control and a little less cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. My studio short experience started with just getting a brief through my managers at the time for the series and what they were looking for. And so I think this is generally true of a lot of studio projects that are often known as open writing assignments or open directing assignments. But that basically just means it's a for hire role. So they put out a call through representation, and I'm assuming also filmmakers, they just met at festivals. I don't think everyone was repped necessarily who made these short film projects. And they just said, you know, these are the kinds of projects that we're looking for. In this case, primarily horror and other genre projects. This is what we're not looking for. And, you know, these are like the pitch parameters. So in my case, I prepped and pitched multiple concepts based on the brief, as well as, you know, my own previous work and what I feel my strengths and interests are. And the first year that I pitched to 20th Digital, they optioned a project of mine that didn't end up getting produced. This was 2020, so many projects did not end up getting produced. But the project that they'd optioned of mine was like a karaoke Twilight Zone kind of project. So it was especially not COVID safe, singing in a small space. And, you know, I conceived of ways to do it that would be, but I think they just weren't taking those kinds of risks that year. And then the second year I came back with a whole new slate of concepts. And something maybe a little different about the pitch process is I also wrote the full scripts for every short. And these are short shorts, you know. They ended up making some longer ones, but they ideally wanted them like around 5 minutes. So it wasn't too arduous, but I did have all of the scripts ready to go. And of course, you know, this is very different than if you're pitching a feature, you just might make a treatment or a deck that kind of has a treatment in it. You don't have to write the full spec, you know, script in the pitch process. But for this, I did. So the pitch itself, I built a very simple deck that now when I look at it, it's a little like embarrassing how simple it is. I feel like that about almost all pitch materials, though. You're like, this is good enough, and then you look back and you're like, oh no. But I think what's important about that, what's helpful, is that I don't think, in general, I think, you know, if you can convey your idea well, it doesn't matter how like elaborate your materials are necessarily. And maybe that's a little balanced with your previous work and, you know, your kind of entire package of yourself and your projects that you're putting together. But I really did not go over the top with the deck itself. So I just outlined each concept with some visual references. And what's kind of making, oh, go ahead.
The question
Yeah.
from Premium Entertainment.
Hi, Ursula. How are you? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. First of all, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. I think that short films are, you know, we all try to make short films to build our slates, to build resumes, to build, you know, portfolios and whatnot, like a calling card type of thing. But like when you did this for the studios, is it the same? Is it a quicker? I'm sure it's a quicker process than features, but do you have to go through level of executives or rewrites and get it to a place where everybody's of course happy with? But like, what are the rounds when you're working with the studio for short film?
Oh, yes. That is where we're going.
Okay, great.
No, of course. Yes. So Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about that since you've asked now, and then I'll go back and show you guys my embarrassing deck afterwards. So I seem a little more confident anyway. Yeah, so if you do end up getting the green light on a studio short, you will quickly realize that some things are a little different, and exactly what you're speaking to in terms of like the approvals process, that's the big distinction. You know, unlike when you're making a short on your own, or even through like an educational program, undergrad, grad school, some other program. Yes, the script has to be signed off on. You will go through, even on something that's so short, a few rewrites to get studio approval. Anyone you want to cast in the project, any department head that you want to hire, you have to go through an approvals process with them too. And of course, like shoot location, like all major creative and or logistical decisions have to be approved. And kind of the way it works. So it almost feels to me, I don't have a ton of commercial experience. I have some, but it's almost like kind of in between making a commercial and making a feature, which I guess is what a short is anyway. But there is a lot more oversight. But I think it does vary on like a case-by-case basis, especially with these guys, like they were making a slate of like 20-something short films. And so, you know, they're a small team. All of these shorts have their own producers who are spearheading like individual production on each project. But yeah, there's a lot of delegation that goes on, and yeah, so you know, I feel like some things were paid more attention to than others, and they were probably different on a project by project basis, just depending on like the needs of each particular project. But for me, yeah, I mean, it was just, you know, normally you can work with whoever you want to work with on a short film project. There's no one to debate or, you know, provide their own. Of course, you'll get input from your casting director, your producers, whoever your collaborators are, but ultimately you as the filmmaker can make the final decision. But it never felt, at least on, you know, this particular project, there was never a point where there was something I really felt super like deal-breakingly strong about that came up. But it was just something to get accustomed to. And you know, aside from, you know, who you're hiring to work on the project or be in the project, when the film is complete, they do own the work. So I'll talk a little bit about our distribution a little later, but you know, you have to ask permission for anything you want to do with the project. If that's like submitting to festivals, if you know you want a festival run, but that wasn't initially planned, or expanding it into a feature, whatever the case may be, it's an owned property, and so that you don't know. So generally, I mean, there might be other kinds of deal arrangements, but I think in most circumstances, when you're making work for a studio, it is you don't own that work anymore. So that's a big,
big makes sense.
Yeah, I hope did that answer your question.
No, it did, absolutely. And just one quick follow-up, just before you continue your thing. Do you feel more confident as a director now because you're doing a lot of these shorts? Do you feel like, you know, I could tackle on a full feature and, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that making a studio short is a great introduction to the studio process. And now that I've done that, I would feel more confident, yeah, making a feature at all, but especially a studio feature, and understanding, at least in a limited way, what the compromises might be and what the process might look like. And I think, of course, on a feature, you'd have most likely more oversight but also more support. I think it's a great kind of trial run of the studio process without having all of the pressure, of course, of a big studio movie. And studio can be, I mean, when I say studio, I don't just mean like major motion picture. Like studio projects can really vary in scale in the streaming landscape. I mean,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
there are, you know, projects made for Hulu, Netflix, like indie film studio projects. The nomenclature gets really confusing, but they can just be like $1 million or $2 million feature film. And so that sounds cool when you say a studio project, but the resources are not limitless. It more refers to just making a project within a specific context. And there's also like streamer as distributor versus streamer as studio, and you know, all kinds of variations thereof. But yeah, to answer your question, I do think it helped me feel more confident and also just get a lay of the land for what making work in this particular context is like. And I think there's pros and cons to making work independently and with a studio and everything in between. There are so many degrees in between.
That's great.
But yeah, cool.
And
Thank you
did
so much. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And did you direct Occupational Hazard as well, or did you just write it?
No, I wrote and directed the project, and it was a big undertaking in a lot of ways. So like I alluded to just a bit ago, the process is much faster making a studio short like this. And in that way, maybe is how I feel like it's akin to a commercial because yeah, there's a lot of approvals and there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, but it also has to happen pretty quickly. Yeah, so maybe to like back up a little bit in the process. So I pitched the short. They let me know they wanted to make it. I found outside producers on my own. I knew, and I worked with a couple producers on Occupational Hazard that I was working with for the first time because I really wanted to work with people who had previous like studio and commercial experience because my experience is less in that realm. And so I wanted producers that I knew would be really good at interfacing with the studio when we were in the heat of production and maybe, you know, feeling confident that they could kind of go between the studio and myself as opposed to me being the like first point of contact. Which of course a good producer should always do that anyway, but it made me feel better. Just know I worked with two producers named Katie White and Megan Leonard, who both made many short films and worked on features, but they did have some of that kind of studio experience, especially Katie, which was really helpful. And then yeah, production, I mean, pre-production and production almost felt simultaneous. Like the timeline itself, I pitched the project, I pitched in May. They let us know that we were going to go ahead with the project. I want to say like end of June, end of June. Let's say it was end of June. And then July was prep, but prep meant like me finding the producers and literally everything else. And the big thing that made it such a massive undertaking is I'm based in Los Angeles. So are many of the folks, some of the department heads I worked with. Some were coming from Seattle, Chicago, New York, but we filmed on location in rural West Virginia. Which sounds wild, but this is not my first time doing that. This is my first time making a studio short, but my family is from West Virginia. I made my grad thesis there also, and so I felt confident that I could get everybody there and make the movie. But the big complication to that was COVID, of course, because we filmed in 2021. no one got COVID on our shoot, which, you know, we had people coming from all over, but it was also only a 2-day shoot. I was there for 2 weeks in preparation, but it was more that we had like COVID testing happening all over the state of West Virginia and like office parks and like I don't know, that part felt a little crazy, and it was a major logistical undertaking on the studio's part and on our part. But we managed to get everyone tested and follow all the protocol. At the time, you know, every set had a lot of really strict COVID protocol, but especially studio projects. And so, you know, there were a lot of restrictions we had to follow that, of course, impact the work. I mean, it's just an additional thing you have to do, and it's part of like the culture at the time. But yeah, that was getting to West Virginia and doing all the COVID stuff was a big deal. But we did it.
Did they give you a budget and then you had to basically stay within that and
Yeah.
utilize?
So something that was really appreciated. So the movie had a set budget that now I can't even remember. I want to say, let's say it was between 25 and 35K. It's probably better that I give a loose estimate anyway. Yeah. But something that was really beneficial is all of the COVID stuff came like direct from the studio. So it wasn't part of that budget, which
Nice.
really, like, if it had been part of the direct budget, we would have had like $3, I'm sure. Like, you know, I mean, that was really, really hard for everyone making work at that time at all levels. But yeah, so that was something that but all of the travel, you know, that was included in the budget. And because I shot in West Virginia before, I anticipated that eating up a lot of the budget, but I'm a big believer in on location filmmaking. Yeah, to me it was worth it. And I knew that, you know, if I could get us to West Virginia, our primary location was my mom's house. So that was free. And we could also, you know, house some people. She has like an Airbnb also. So we could house people there. Yeah, it's just a community. It's a community that I'm from, my family's from. And so I have a lot of soft resources to offset the cost of getting people to West Virginia. And it's just me. I mean, I think the reason that the studio selected this particular project is that it is very personal to me, even though it's like a body horror, psychological horror, crazy little movie, because issues in Appalachia mean so much to me, and I do have personal connection and insight. I think that's why it was worth the risk for the studio as well to try to coordinate all of this in West Virginia during the pandemic. Sounds wild in retrospect, but I think anytime you talk about a movie you've made, you know, there's that process of how did we do that? And why did we think that was a good idea? Yeah, that's pretty.
Are there tax breaks for shorts in West Virginia, like tax credits or anything like that?
There are. Time we shot, I think the tax credits had been phased out. They were recently reinstated. But the big thing with there's a minimum spend, and so I don't think it matters what your project is. I don't think we would have made the minimum spend because this project was so, even though, you know, we all had to get there, it was pretty small and self-contained. And yeah, I mean, it's weird. Occupational Hazard is the only studio project I've made, completed, but I have made other shorts that were larger, that had a bigger crew, that maybe had a little more budget, that were, you know, a little more shoot days, yeah, just more. So it was kind of a funny balance. It was making something for a studio that was actually more contained than a lot of my previous work, and so maybe that kind of negotiation made it a little more manageable in hindsight too. Like, I love to I don't know, but I was also younger. The younger you are, the more locations you want
Yeah.
company move to in a day. I don't know. Because you're learning, but yeah, so all of the kind of wild COVID stuff, I feel like was really offset with primarily being in one location. The other, great thing about shooting there, the movie is about a woman coal miner who's in an accident and gets exposed to this like mysterious force, this mysterious substance, and it starts to take over her mind and eventually body. And we were able to shoot in an actual coal mine. It's now a coal mining museum. And a lot of other projects have shot there. My friend Elaine McMillian Sheldon, she had a feature doc at Sundance last year called King Coal, and they shot in the same parts of the mine. So it's kind of funny to see her movie, very different movie, not a horror film, in the same mine. But yeah, so we also got to film in a location that we could not find in California or anywhere else, really, outside of other Appalachian states. So that to me and to many, everyone was really thrilled to be in the coal mine. Maybe less so our actor, Virginia Newcomb, she had to really be down in the muck in the coal mine. It was a lot harder for her. But I think she had fun too. We all had fun. In fact, yeah, my DP and I kind of we tried to stay in the coal mine longer than we were supposed to. It was cool. But I don't know if that answered the question you asked me. The tax credits. There are tax credits.
It's okay. That was more interesting than the tax credits anyway.
Yeah. But there are, so the tax credits came back last year, question mark, maybe 2022, but they're there now, which is all that matters. And yeah, it's a good program. A lot of the West Virginia has a good program, so does Kentucky, so does Tennessee. I mean, all of these states, I don't know where everybody's tuning in from, but I feel like every state has its own film community, and the tax credits like come and go, and it's like depends on who's like politically vocal about them at any given time and how well they're understood at any given time. I don't know. But in West Virginia right now, they're there. And if anybody wants to make a project there, I can give them a lot of advice and resources, and
Yeah, well,
it's a great place to make work.
we talked about that last week. Yeah, because I'm shooting my next film there, so definitely be talking to you.
Yeah.
But did you want to show your the pitch deck?
Oh gosh. Yeah, why not?
I wasn't going to let you off the hook for that. You have to show it.
Sure. Yeah, so I'll show you guys my deck, and then I'll go over my notes and make sure. Yeah, so I'll show you the deck, and then we'll talk a little bit more about like the approvals and all that stuff. The other thing I will say now, since we were talking about production, is we did have no one from the studio came to my shoot because it was in rural West Virginia and it was very expensive to get there. And also there were like 20 something other shorts being made at the same time. So I think some of the projects that filmed locally in LA, people went, but not as possible for more far-flung places. But we did have remote monitoring, but it was really pretty casual and fine. I feel like before the shoot, I was like, oh, they're gonna be watching me. And I've gotta I have to have impeccable COVID protocol, which we did. But just the pressure of that, and also I'm not used to having a company representative watching me direct. I don't think most people are who've come from an indie film background. Being totally normal. I feel like the only comment was like, looks good. Like it was fine. But yeah, I know that is not everyone's experience with remote monitoring. And I think sometimes it can feel like weird and kind of disembodied pressure, you know, like the Wizard of Oz is like watching you make your movie or something. But for me, it ended up being really, really fine. Just something that I worried about more beforehand, and that ended up not being a big deal. But I have been on, I mean, I have been on other sets that I was not directing with studio reps who did, you know, have something to say about almost like every shot and every setup, and they were really involved, and sometimes you do have to manage that. So it can really go a variety of ways, and you're not gonna know. I mean, you'll probably have some inkling, but you won't really know until you're doing it. So you have to be a little prepared to be managed to whatever degree, micro, macro, you know, whatever it ends up being. But yes, so I will show you my deck now. Give me a second.
Is the Hulu bite-sized Halloween an ongoing thing, or are they doing more of it?
Yeah, so what is, hold on, my computer is sorting me. But yeah, I can talk while doing this. Is it an ongoing thing? It was for some years. I'm not sure. So 20th Digital Studio was, like I mentioned, was a Fox subsidiary. They became a Disney subsidiary. Last year they dissolved as part of the Disney layoffs. But they've become an independent production company, and they still have a first look deal with Hulu. But this is the first year of doing that, and so in light of the strike and everything, I'm not sure if they will. Yeah, I'm not sure if they will make them this year, but I hope that they make them at some point in the future. My computer's really cracked down on Zoom sharing. It does not want me to show you guys this deck. Oh, okay. It wants me to quit and reopen, so I think I'm gonna have to rejoin the Zoom. Everybody hang out for just a second.
You can ask me questions if anybody wants to know. Adam.
Hi. I came in a little late. Sorry. Andy, you're with Big Apple?
Yeah, I'm the moderator.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah, no, I came in late. My only question was this a short film that it was part of a like a competition to pitch, or was or did it go the other way around? Like they approached, I guess now Ursula's back on. That was my question because I came in a little late. Hi, how are you? Yeah, was this part of like a pitch competition, or did they approach you after seeing something you had done?
It wasn't a competition, so I received the brief about, you know, this particular series through my representation, through my managers. One of my managers at the time had a, you know, a previous relationship with 20th Digital, and so that's how I was introduced to them. And it was basically like an open directing assignment. So you know, they saw a ton of pitches. I don't know the exact number, but these guys probably know, they know a lot of filmmakers. They see dozens upon dozens upon dozens. I don't know, they might see hundreds of pitches a year. It was a lot. But I don't think everyone necessarily met them through representation. I think they do like scout at film festivals and you know, reach out to filmmakers whose work that they've seen and thought could be a good fit for the series. but yeah, I mean, it is competitive in the pitch process, but not a competition per se. Nowhere where you could like, yeah, like sign up to pitch, unfortunately. But I know there are studio short programs, like Disney has a different studio short program, and it's always hard to find information about these because they don't often happen every year. But there are other tracks. Netflix had like an emerging filmmaker program that again was a little more internal, that was shorts, and now I think they're just doing like micro budget features. Like these programs are always in flux, which makes them a little difficult to track. If you do have either a representation or shorts on the circuit, I think that can help you tap into what's going on. What's going on? Where can I get money for another short film? But yeah.
So, quick follow-up question, because you mentioned the studios or the film festivals. I promise my last before you go into your pitch deck. Did they help you with your festival strategy? Because I've been making shorts for 10 years now, and the festival strategy is something I've always tackled alone. Did they assist you with that as well, or was that all on you? Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we'll save my pitch deck for last because I feel like this is good. I'm just trying to get out of it, Andy. Yeah, Adam, you might have missed where I said it was embarrassing, but
I'm
anyway.
sure it's beautiful, and
It's fine.
it takes a long time to make those, so full respect.
Sure. But yes, so right. So I talked about production, and I guess before distro, to touch on post a little bit too. I will get to your question, Andy. But like notes on cuts and the approvals process that I was chatting about earlier, that continues through post-production. The timeline for post on this project was so fast. We shot in August. It had to be done end of September. We did not shoot beginning of August. It was like middle. Let's say it was middle. But yeah, so post was really fast for a lot of VFX. The edit itself didn't take very long. We only shot 2 days. It wasn't an insane amount of footage. We were pretty intentional with what we shot. But the studio was pretty quick in getting their notes back. But VFX, yeah, was pretty lengthy. I work frequently with a VFX artist out of Chicago who's like a one-man band named Zach Moore, and he's a fantastic VFX artist. But this is my first time working with particle effects, which are very awesome VFX that you see in any like major movie, any Marvel movie. They take a long time, they're very expensive and difficult. I mean, communicating with a VFX artist on exactly how you want particle effects to look and feel and move, it was a learning curve. And we did have to kind of in the 11th hour hire an additional VFX artist to manage just those effects. And we had so many more effects that were going on simultaneously. So that was really ambitious. And I'm glad to know all this now. But at the time it was pretty stressful. And I really did not want to, miss a hard studio and impose deadline. I learned later that some people did, but I didn't think you could do that. I mentioned already, my parents were in the military. I grew up with, like, I can't miss a deadline. It's a big deal. Which is good. You don't want to, set a bad precedent anyway, but I thought it was like firm.
How long was it? What's the length of the short?
The short is 7-ish minutes, 7-8 minutes.
All right.
Yeah, which doesn't sound long, but when you have VFX in like over half your shots, it's crazy. But for post to be that brief, and I think what I'm used to in post on an indie short where like, yeah, maybe there's a deadline or like a festival I want to submit to, is really taking the time, knowing that I can't pay everyone what I would love to be able to pay them, giving them the time to do the best work they can without sacrificing like their jobs that pay them more. And, like when you're an indie filmmaker, I think it's really important to, understand just what you can offer your collaborators and be understanding of their schedule and whatever. In this case, we could not do that. So it's a big lesson in making work, and very ambitious work on a very tight timeline. And we also had to prepare, like, so kind of going back to what Adam was asking. So this movie, my understanding of the movie was that it was going to be primarily for Hulu, intended for Hulu, and it was also a little bit of like a proof of concept. There was at the outset this notion that potentially later on some of these features could be, or shorts could be adapted into features. And so those were my two goalposts. I wanted to make something that I thought would be well suited for streaming, and that could also be expanded into a larger project at some like nebulous later date. Didn't realize that that could happen so soon. But yeah, what I didn't think of it as was a festival movie. But when the film was completed, they let us know that they did have some budget for festivals. So the studio did pay for us to submit to basically a list of like approved festivals they thought would be a good showcase for the project. And there were some festivals that I had like personal connections with that I'd screened out before, and just enjoy going to, or enjoy the work that they program, that I was able to get approved as well. But that had to be an approvals process, just like all the creative elements of the film. And in hindsight, I do think I might have conceived of some things differently if I knew it was also going to be a festival movie. Because I do think, whenever you're making a project, you think about like what kind of audience is this for? And I wasn't thinking, not that, festivals are so divorced from these other kind of platforms, but they are a little different. So yeah, I might have changed some things or just thought about some things a little differently, but also maybe not. And I think it just took me by surprise when I realized it was going to be submitted as well. But we did screen it at some festivals, and that was really nice. Because otherwise, I only would have watched the project like on TV at home, especially because again, it was 2021. So to be able to screen at some festivals and see it with an audience was really awesome. And so I was really glad that the studio, at least financially, helped support us in like a limited festival run. We didn't submit to as many festivals as I would have if it were like a short that I made, with friends or in grad school or the other avenues through which I've made short films. So that was a little different, but yeah, it was hard. Yeah, I mean, this is just, my VFX artists, I think, both did an incredible job, but it was hard for me to see it on the big screen and think about, oh, we didn't have so much time. If we had more time, and we could have went this, and I hope people don't notice this. And but I think that's just the nature of, I mean, if anything, that's good preparation for potentially making a studio film, but it's actually even better preparation for making television. Television moves so fast. And when you direct for TV, you're going into somebody else's wheelhouse and trying to make a faithful interpretation of it. Yeah, on an incredibly limited timeline. And of course, everything's kind of there that you need, so that's different. But yeah, it was a good learning experience. And I did know that going in. I knew we were being really ambitious. And I just wanted to see what we could do. And we saw. And yeah, with the Hulu distribution, I don't know the exact numbers of like how well the short did on Hulu. Famously, this information is not shared or was not post-strike or pre-strike. How this information will be disseminated now, who knows? But they did say that we were, among one of the more watched projects of the season. They might have said that to everybody, but I don't know. But it was, I mean, it's really cool to have a project on a platform where anyone can watch it, and the accessibility is not always something that you have with a short film. Like, of course, there's so many other online distribution venues that are not like a streaming platform, but yeah, but so that was really, really valuable, I think. Now I will share my deck. Unless, Andy, did you have a question?
I was gonna say we have to get that under the wire because it's a guy.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Oh, I think you have to make.
Right. There you
think
go.
after this many years of Zoom, it's feel smoother, but not for me. Okay. Okay, we're nearly there. All righty. So this is my deck. As I said before, it was very simple. But as you guys can probably tell, I have no problem talking. Talking. So, I really do think, especially if you're pitching something that's only 5 to 7 minutes long, and you're doing several of those, you just want a few visual references and like a basic explanation of what it is you're talking about so that you don't get too off task while you're attempting to talk about it. So this was my deck, and this occupational hazard is the short that I made. You can see it's basically just a little logline teasery kind of synopsis. Then I get into what is it about, what's the genre, what's the theme, what are a couple of comps, and that's what I did for every concept that I pitched. And yes, this is just Google Slides. Easy to make accessible. Yeah, and all the other concepts that I pitched them were more like sci-fi horror. Before making occupational hazard, my previous project, AVA in the End, was a project that I did not write, but I did direct, and it was a sci-fi piece that ends up taking a little bit more of a horror direction. But yeah, so that was, something I knew that they would look at my work and they would be able to say like, oh, sure, she can make another like more horror-y kind of sci-fi, like online culture oriented project. But occupational hazard, I'd never made like a body horror film or anything like that, but I had shot in Appalachia before, and so my like angle of experience was more yeah, like location based. And I'm just kind of, going through these. You can see they're all pretty similar. It's just some visual references and kind of the thematic core. What's it about? What's the vibe gonna be? And I didn't really use film stills. I wanted to just more, for this pitch, give a sense of world and context. And yeah, I do have to say, looking at this a couple years later, this very first slide, that pretty much encapsulates the entire short. So you don't have to go crazy over the top with your deck if you can be really, for something like this, with for just a series of shorts, If you can be really precise with your imagery and with your language, I think that's enough to leave them with. And like I mentioned earlier, I did write all of these scripts in advance too, so they could like read them and you know, get a fuller sense of what they would all be like. But yeah, they didn't want to make any. The one that they had optioned the previous year was more of like an AVA in the End, you know, kind of tech oriented project. But I think, you know, especially when you're pitching any project, studio or not, the more specific something is to you and the more of like a why now you can give is really beneficial. So I will stop sharing this unless somebody wants to see anything on a particular slide.
Oh, does each slide have more? Narcy has a question, I think. When you got the meeting after submitting the pitch deck, do you
I
submit-
did, yeah. I did submit all the scripts, and they wanted all of them. So for all, let's see, how many did I do this year? 1, 2, 3, 4. For all 4, I submitted every script. And they asked, like, during the pitch itself, you know, they ask a ton of questions. And they're like narrative questions, like what happens after this, and like walk me through point A to B to C. And then, but yeah, primarily narrative questions, not so much like visual questions or logistical, like how are you going to do this? Although I think I provided some of that unsolicited. But yeah, they really just wanted to hammer out the stories in the pitch and worry about everything else later. How did I get my rep? Yeah, good question. So I met my initial managers when I was in grad school. I received a screenwriting award actually the year like after I graduated. And when I received that award, the school, as part of the award, which there are a bunch of other awards given too, so there are a bunch of other students also involved in this. They set us up on these like kind of speed dating meetings with a bunch of different like executives and reps. And I met an executive who some friends of mine had worked with, and I liked her, and we, you know, hit it off in the speed dating thing. And then I had a call with her later. I'd been meeting with, once you start meeting, here's a secret. Once you meet with any rep, you can start telling people you're meeting with reps. And then they're like, oh, you're meeting with reps. So that just makes it seem like you've reached some nebulous stage of accomplishment. And whether you have or not, you know, I guess you could also just say that, but I didn't. I had met with a couple. So I told her I'd been meeting with reps, and she was like, oh, you need a shark. I'll never, yeah, such a funny like Hollywood thing to say. She's like, you need a shark. I'm gonna introduce you to this guy. And so I started working with my reps, and it was fun at the time meeting. So I was initially rep at Circle of Confusion, and the people I've been meeting with were at smaller companies, or they were independent managers, and I was very nervous to go to Circle of Confusion because to me that seemed like such a big company. And I was very surprised when they wanted to work with me. But yeah, I think getting repped is very important. It's not the end all be all. Your reps don't change your life overnight, and for the most part. But it does give you access to more like assignments like this that you can potentially pitch for. I will caution, I have some friends who I feel like are pitching day and night all the time on stuff that they're not always the best fit for, or it can become a full-time job in and of itself, and it's unpaid. And so it's really important, you know, to take every opportunity you can get, but also not let it become the whole job, or else, yeah, you'll go real broke real fast. What stage of completion were the scripts upon submission? They were first drafts, and they did change. Of course, I mean, the one that they decided to produce, Occupational Hazard, changed throughout the process. One of the big things I love working with animals. I wanted to write my mom's dog into the movie, and they were like, absolutely not, which is very common, you know. Despite having worked with animals in the past, they were like, no, that's one thing too many. And that was very fair. Very fair.
Well, thanks so much. We have to wrap up, but very interesting conversation. And then thank you all for your questions. And thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you guys. I really hope that this was helpful, and yeah, good luck with your own shorts, features, all the projects you've got in the works.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. Bye.